Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Yom Kippurim, and we'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, and hopefully we will also get on to Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, and hopefully we will get on to Ayin Hey Amud Beis as well in a bid to make up for some lost time. We begin today on the very bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch on Ayin Daled Amud Beis, in the middle of Siman Tafresh Yud Sif Daled, in the midst of the words of the Ramah, all the way on the bottom line. So the Ramah had mentioned that there is a minig to light a ner neshama. There is a minig to light a yartzeit licht on Yom Kippur for the departed. Now, the Ramah says here on the bottom line, near the end of the line, Ve'im kavu nerois elu b'yom haKippurim. If the yartzeit licht goes out on Yom Kippur, ein loymar le'ena Yehudi sheyachzar v'yadlikem, you should not say to a non-Jew, you should not ask a non-Jew to go ahead and relight them. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Eis Cotton Yud Gimel, ein loymar afilu b'remiza, you're not even allowed to use remiza, you're not even allowed to hint to a non-Jew. Oh, you see that candle over there? It looks like it went out. And hint to him and hope that he will go ahead and relight it, because this is essentially Amir La'akum on a Malacha Da'araisa. It's Amir La'akum on Yom Kippur to go ask somebody to do Havara. That would be an Issa Malacha Da'araisa. Amir La'akum is certainly Aser, and it's Aser even Beremiza. And further, says the Chavetz Chaim, U'mitzvah oisa k'she'anicheha kach mechuba. Not only should you not go ahead and ask a non-Jew or even hint to a non-Jew to relight it, but you should realize that by keeping the halachas of Yom Kippur, you're actually doing a mitzvah by leaving that candle unlit, even though you really would like to have it relit. Now the Chavetz Chaim explains where this practice may have come from, where some people actually would ask a non-Jew to relight it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'nahagu likach akom lishmar haneros shelo yavoyu chas v'shalom lidei dleika. Especially in the olden days when they had lots of wooden buildings and no smoke alarms, etc., there really was a great danger of fire. And therefore it became the practice in the Batei Knesiyos to ask a non-Jew to watch, to stand watch over these standing candles. So the non-Jew was there watching the candles. It became very easy, says the Chavetz Chaim, because of this, nahagu loimaloi lechabois ulahadlik. They would tell him, listen, you're going to be watching the candles. If something goes out, relight it. However, the Chavetz Chaim says certainly we should protest to anybody who does this. Says the Chavetz Chaim, not only that, he says even if we find that the non-Jew wants to do it on his own, he wants to do it by himself, you need to protest, since he's essentially doing this on behalf of the Yidden. You have to go ahead and you have to be moicha, and you have to stop them from doing it. If you see, this is brought down. We had this previously in Hilchos Shabbos and Hilchos Yom Tov. If you see the non-Jew going to do something solely on behalf of a Yid, you really have to stop him. Okay. Ice cut Yudalid, Sheyachzar V'yadlikem. We're not supposed to go ask a non-Jew or even hint to a non-Jew that he should go relight the candles. And since we do find that people are very worried, they're very concerned, and if they see that their ner went out, whether it's the ner that they lit for themselves for Yom Kippur, or it's the yartzeit licht, when they see that it went out, they get very concerned about it. Even though the Chavetz Chaim says, to me, there is no concern if your candle happens to go out on Yom Kippur. There's no reason to suggest that the reason your candle went out is because of any, what I like to refer to as boogeyman stuff. It is brought down that if your ner goes out on Yom Kippur, there are svarim that say that that's a Siman Ra. It's It's not a good siman if your ner goes out on Yom Kippur. But the Chofetz Chaim says there's no reason to get carried away if your ner goes out on Yom Kippur. Many times a ner goes out because there's a draft and it got blown out, or it went out because the wick wasn't a good wick, the candle wasn't a good candle. So if you know that you had a perfectly good candle, a perfectly stable licht, in a place where there was absolutely no drafts and there was no earthly reason why the candle went out, so in that case, if you get the heebie-jeebies, if your candle goes out, I can understand. But the Chofetz Chaim says over here, you put your ner in the Beis HaKnesses and you find that your ner went out. Chofetz Chaim says there's no reason that you should be concerned. It could be it went out because of a draft. I'm not sure what it means, machmas choim. Choim means heat. I don't know why candle would go out because of heat. I'm not sure. Nevertheless, says the Chofetz Chaim, since we do find that a lot of people do become concerned over this, the Chofetz Chaim gives a very simple eitzah how to avoid any concerns. He says everybody should bring their neirs to shul. They should give their ner to the shamish to say, listen, here's my ner. Go put it wherever you will. Instead of you taking the ner and putting the ner and knowing exactly which candle is your candle, everyone should just give their candles to the shamish. Let the shamish put them where he'll put them. And that way, when a candle goes out, you don't know if it was your candle or your chavis candle, and then no one's worried. And you shouldn't pay any attention to it at all. Sometimes, especially in times of poverty, somebody will think, well, I don't want to not pay attention to my candle at all, because if I give my candle to the shul, and then after Yom Kippur, maybe I had enough wax in there for 2 days. I don't want to give away 24 hours worth of candle, so that's why I'm paying attention to which candle is my candle. Says the Chofetz Chaim, no, make up in your mind, whatever's left over, leave it there, let it stay in the shul. So worst comes to worst, you'll also get a mitzvah that you gave ner ma'or to the shul, and they'll use your remaining candle on a Shabbos. Continues the Ramah on the top line of Ayin Hey Yom and Aleph. Misha kava neroi b'Yom Kippur. If somebody's ner, and over here this means not the yahrzeit licht, it means the ner that you lit for yourself. Remember, we saw the halacha that for every married male, we light a ner on Yom Kippur. Misha kava neroi b'Yom Kippur. If somebody's ner went out on Yom Kippur. So I said previously, there are svarim that bring down that that's a siman ra for the person. Says the Chofetz Chaim, says the Ramah, Yachzar v'yadlikenu b'motzai Yom Kippur. You should go ahead and you should relight the candle on Motzei Yom Kippur. Your candle went out on Yom Kippur. Don't just forget about it. Motzei Yom Kippur, you should relight it. Va'al yichabenu oid. And then you should not put it out. You should let it burn itself out. Let it burn all the fuel that's there and let it burn itself out. Eliyanichenu lidlaik ad gemira. Let it burn out on its own. V'gam, and furthermore, says the Ramah, yekabel alav, he should accept upon himself, shekol yomov, that for the rest of his days, lo yechabe b'motzai Yom Kippur neroi, he will not put out his ner on Motzei Yom Kippur, loy hu v'loy acher. He won't put it out, and he won't have anybody else put it out. So for some reason, if your ner goes out in Yom Kippur, the Ramah is alluding to the fact that this is a siman ra, and in order to be misakin it, what you should do is, you should relight it on Motzei Yom Kippur, and you should not put it out. You should let it burn itself out. And not only that, you should accept upon yourself that for the rest of your life, you're going to light your ner for Yom Kippur, and after Yom Kippur, you're not going to put it out. You're going to let it burn for as long as it will burn. What's behind this? I can't tell you. I don't know. This is above my pay grade. Says the Ramah Vayter. V'yesh oimrim, there are those that say, sheyesh lahatzia hashulchanois b'Yom Kippur k'may b'Shabbos, that you should adorn the tables in the Beis HaKnesses. I'm assuming he means here in the Beis HaKnesses, even though now I'm questioning myself. Who says it means only in the Beis HaKnesses? It may very well mean in your home as well. V'yesh oimrim sheyesh lahatzia hashulchanois, that you should adorn the tables with the beautiful tablecloths b'Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, k'may b'Shabbos, the same way you do on Shabbos. V'chein noyagin, and indeed, that is our minig, and indeed, we do that at home as well. At home, we put on the Shabbos tablecloth on Erev Yom Kippur, even though you're certainly not eating by the table, but you put on the beautiful Shabbos tablecloth anyway. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why do you do this? Because we find in the pasuk that Yom Kippur is referred to as Shabbos Shabbosayin. So if the Torah Kedosha refers to Yom Kippur as Shabbos Shabbosayin, it's appropriate that we should take out the Shabbos finery, the Shabbos tablecloths, and we should put the Shabbos tablecloths on the table for Yom Kippur. Continues the Ramah. Yeshanagu, there are those that have the minig lilbaish begadim levanim nikiyim b'yom kippur, that you should wear white, clean clothing on Yom Kippur. Dugmas malachei hashares, similar to the malachei hashares, you should dress yourself up. That you're trying to have an aliyah, you're trying to make yourself as ruchniistic as possible, and you want to be comparable to the malachim, especially the malachim don't have any chatoim. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton tezayin. Shenagu lilbaish begadim levanim v'noyagin, and the minigish shagam anoshim, that the women as well loivshim begadim levanim enukim, they wear white clean clothing lechvayid hayom, in honor of Yom HaKadosh. Aval, however, lo yikashtu atzman b'tachshitin, they should not adorn themselves with jewelry and finery, shemiskashtin behen b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov, that they wear on Shabbos and Yom Tov, mipnei emas Yom Hadin, because that detracts from the solemnity of the day, the ema, the dread of the Yom Hadin, Ayom v'Noira. We don't go ahead and put on jewelry and adorn ourselves. Ve'ein noi hagois lilboish kittel. And the Chavetz Chaim says, and this struck me, I always remember whenever I see this, how interesting it struck me. Ve'ein noi hagois lilboish kittel. Chavetz Chaim tells us that there is no minig that the women should wear something similar to a kittel. I bet you didn't even think that there was any room to have such a minig. Ice Katan Yud Zayin, the Ramah said that we wear white clean clothing to make ourselves similar to the Malachei Hashares. When we tamzan, for this reason, Nagu Lilbaish Bigdei Pishton Lavan Nikim, for this reason there was a minig to wear white linen, nice white clean linen garments. K'moshe Kasav, because that would be similar to the pasuk in Daniel that says Ish Echad Lavush Badim, that the Malach appeared as an Ish Echad, as a man wearing Badim. Badim are white linen garments. Continues the Ramah, V'chein Naihagin Lilbaish HaKittel Shehu Lavan V'Naki. And because of this is why we have the minig on Yom Kippur to wear kittel, which is white and clean. So the first reason we have here in the Ramah for wearing a kittel is because of this minig to be similar to the Malachei Hashares and to wear begadim levanim nikim. Now, says the Ramah, gamu beged mesim. We know that the kittel is also used as burial shrouds. And therefore, by putting on a kittel on the Yom Hadin, leiv ha'adam nichna v'nishbar, person realizes that he's wearing burial shrouds. And he keeps on saying over and over again in davening that the Sifrei Chaim v'Sifrei Maves Psuchim Lefanav, that it's the Yom Hadin, Ayom v'Noira, and the Rebbeinu Shalom has the books of life and the books of death opened in front of him, and you're standing here wearing burial shrouds. And that causes somebody to have a leiv nichna v'nishbar, a humbled and broken heart before the Rebbeinu Shalom, to come to the Rebbeinu Shalom with great hachna, with great humility, to seek forgiveness for his averis, and to beg the Rebbeinu Shalom to have rachmanis, to have mercy, and to give him a good year. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Katan Yud Ches. Nichna v'nishbar, this causes a person to have a humbled and a broken heart. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'gam avel toich shteim asar chaydish al aviv v'imai, even an avel, somebody who's in mourning for a parent, and it's within the 12 months of avelus, ay toich shloishim al shar kroivim, or an avel who's in mourning over a different one of the close relatives that you mechuyev to sit shiva for, other than a parent, so that the length of avelus is 30 days. Somebody who lost or a brother or a sister, so the term of avelus is shloishim, is 30 days. Yachal lelavshay. Such an avel is allowed, he's able to wear a kittel on Yom Kippur, even during the term of avelus. Now, why does the Chavetz Chaim need to tell me this? why would you think that there's a reason not to wear a kittel when you're in Avelus? And why indeed can you wear a kittel when you're in Avelus? So this goes back to the two reasons that the Ramah gave us for wearing a kittel. If the reason that you're wearing a kittel is because you're wearing begadim, levanim, nikim, dumya, the malachai hashares, you want to appear like a malach hashares, then it means that you're wearing a very choshev a beged. You're wearing a beged of malchus. You're wearing a beged that makes you like the malachai hashares. That would perhaps not be appropriate when you're in the midst of avelus. However, we do have the second reason, which is that it's a beged mesim, and therefore it causes you to have a leiv nichna v'nishbar. That's no problem during a term of Avelus. Indeed, maybe it's even super appropriate during a term of Avelus. And therefore, that's why the Chavetz Chaim says that during Avelus, you are able to wear a kittel if you so desire, because you could rely on the second reason for wearing a kittel, and then it's appropriate to wear the kittel during Avelus. V'yesh b'kaimais, continues the Chavetz Chaim, he says there are places, shenai hagim shein aval loiv shay. There are places where they have the minig that an aval does not wear a kittel during Avelus because of the first reason of the Ramah, because it's a beged that's timed to the malachai hasharis. Now an interesting halacha, says the Chavetz Chaim, ein lichnais lebeis hakisei b'kittel. You're not allowed to go to the beis hakisei. You can't go to the bathroom while wearing your kittel. Shehu miyuchad l'tfila. Because even though you don't necessarily think of the kittel as being a beged of mitzvah, a tashmishe kedusha, it's not like tefillin, let's say. But still in all, it's a beged that's miyuchad for tefillah. And a beged that's miyuchad for tefillah, you don't wear in a beis hakisei. Aval hashted by mutter. However, in halacha, when we use the term of beis hakisei, we refer to a place where you go for gedolim. That's a place where you go to excrete. But to urinate, that's not necessarily called a beis hakisei. And over there, the Chavetz Chaim says technically you could urinate while wearing a kittel. Okay, that concludes Siman Taf Reish Yud. Now we move on to Siman Taf Reish Yud Aleph. You'll please excuse the coffee cup, even though it's not full of coffee, it's tea. But I just need to keep my throat lubricated. Okay, Siman Taf Reish Yud Aleph, Shalel Yom HaKippurim Dinoi Ki Yomai, the halachas that pertain to the fact that the night of Yom Kippur has all of the same halachas as the day of Yom Kippur. Don't make the mistake of thinking, we know that we have many Tanesim. We just went through Shivasa B'Tammuz. Shivasa B'Tammuz, the restrictions of the Tainus begin in the morning. They don't begin at the night. So maybe Yom Kippur also. Maybe the Yisurim of Yom Kippur begin in the morning and not at night. Therefore, the Chaber tells us here, no. Shalel Yom Kippurim Dinoi Ki Yomai. The din, the halachas of the night of Yom Kippur are identical to the halachas of the day of Yom Kippur. Ubai Beis Seifim, and here we have two Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, Yom HaKippurim leiloi ki yomai l'chol davar. The halachas that apply to the night of Yom Kippur are exactly identical to the halachas that apply to the day of Yom Kippur in every way. Says the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Katan Aleph, leiloi ki yomai, the night is the same as the day. Now the Chavetz Chaim brings this from a pasuk, T'ksiv me erev ad erev. He brings this from the pasuk that says, "V'inisem es nafshei seichem me erev ad erev," that you have to pain yourself from erev, from evening until evening. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you see from there that the night of Erev Yom Kippur has the same din as the day. It's not that v'inisem es nafshei seichem for the Yom of Yom Kippur. It's me erev ad erev. Okay, that's very nice. The strange thing is that that's not really what the Gemara in Yoma on Pei Aleph Amud Aleph says. The Gemara in Yoma on Pei Aleph Amud Aleph says that there are 5 different psukim that forbid malacha on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara darshans that each one of those 5 is to teach us a different halacha. And one of the 5 is to teach us that the halacha of Yom Kippur night is the same as the halacha of Yom Kippur day. And another one of those 5 is to tell us that this halacha pertains not only to the question of malacha, but to the other chamisha inuyim as well. So I'm a little bit perplexed as to why the Chavetz Chaim chose to bring down the pasuk of me erev ad erev. One possibility I have is that if you look in the Torah says this halacha, that leiloi ki yomi, and the Beis Yosef says, how do we know that? Well, we know that because we learned the halacha earlier of Tosefes Yom HaKippurim. We learned earlier that you have to start being noyig the isurim of Yom Kippur not only at nightfall from Yom Kippur, but you even have to be moisef mechael al hakodesh, and you have to start keeping the isurim during the day of the 9th of Tishrei. Now, how do we know that? Well, that we learned out from the pasuk of Me'erev ad Erev. But here in this Siman in Tov Reish Yud Aleph, the Beis Yosef says, how do we know that the din of Yom Kippur is leiloi ki yomi? Well, very simple, because we know that we have a din of Tosefes Yom Kippurim. If we have a din of Tosefes Yom Kippurim, we have to be moisef mechayel al kodesh. Then certainly, when the kodesh begins at nightfall of the 9th going into the 10th, certainly you have to start keeping all the halachas of Yom Kippur, right? That's what the Beis Yosef says, and that we know from the pasuk of Me'erev ad Erev. So maybe that's why the Chavetz Chaim brings down to the pasuk of Me'erev ad Erev. In any case, let's continue the words of the Mechaber here in Sif Aleph. So the Mechaber said, Yom Kippurim leiloi ki yomi l'chol davar. The night of Yom Kippur has the same exact halachas as the day, l'chol davar, in every way. And now the Mechaber explains a little bit. The Mechaber says, U'mahem hadvarim ha'asurim boi. What are the things that are aser on Yom Kippur? Malacha, there's an issur malacha on Yom Kippur. Achila and shtia, you're not allowed to eat or drink on Yom Kippur. Rechitza, you're not allowed to bathe on Yom Kippur. Sicha, anointing oneself with any kind of oil. Ne'ilas hasandal, wearing shoes. Tashvish hamita, and marital relations. These are all of the things that are aser on Yom Kippur. We have an issur malacha, plus the chamisha inuyim. We have an issur malacha, and on top of the issur malacha, we have to pain ourselves in 5 ways. So you have achil and shtia, that's one. You have rechitza, that's another one. You have sicha, anointing, that's a third. You have nilas hasandal, wearing shoes, is a 5th. And tashvish hamita, marital relations, is a 5th. Incidentally, I strongly protest against the custom in some schools where they want to teach the halacha accurately, so they want to tell the children that there are chamisha inuyim, but then they become politically correct and they become sensitive, and they don't want to tell them that one of the chamisha inuyim is tashvish hamita. So what do? They say, yeah, there are chamisha inuyim. There are 5 inuyim. There are 5 prohibitions on Yom Kippur, 5 ways you have to pain yourself. What are they? Achila, shtia, rechitza, sicha, ne'ilas hasandal. I'm sorry, but they're teaching the children something which is wrong, and it could lead to a gross error. At some point later in their life, they say, wait a second, I remember I learned that the chamisha inuyim are achila, shtia, rechitza, sicha, and ne'ilas hasandal. I guess this tashvish hamita thing, now when they're old enough to know what it is, I guess that's only some kind of chumrah or only some kind of minig. Meantime, it's not. It's one of the chamisha inuyim. So you can't go ahead and teach children something that are wrong because you have some kind of a sensitivity. That would be megalapanim b'torah shaloi ka'halacha, in my humble opinion. So I would strongly protest against that practice. In any case, now that I gave you my little rant and rave over there, let's go to the Chavetz Chaim Ois Cotton Bays. The Mechaber enumerated the different prohibitions on Yom Kippur, and he said malacha, there's an issur malacha, and achila, eating, etc. The Gemara Yolfina Lahu Mikama Kroi. In the Gemara, he brings down over here Daf Ayin Vav and Aleph and Yuma. We learn out from many psukim the Chol Hani Nikra Inui, that each one of these chamisha inuyim, we learn out in the Gemara, each one is considered an inui. Each one is considered a way of paining yourself physically, and therefore it fits into the pasuk's declaration of v'inisem es nafshei sechem. In other words, we know that the pasuk says that on Yom Kippur you have to pain yourself. However, the pasuk doesn't tell us precisely what form this paining should take. And therefore, the Gemara goes to great lengths to bring down different psukim and to show us that each one of the chamisha inuyim is something that fits into v'inisem es nafshei sechem. Now again, the Chavetz Chaim brings down this is the way he codifies it. He writes that this is how we know the source for the Chamishi Inuyim. The Gemara seems to say something slightly different. The Gemara seems to learn out from Shabbosain. From V'inisen Asnav Shalisechem, the Gemara learns out an Isser Achila and Shtia. And then from an extra word, Shabbosain, Shvois, that there's something that you should stop doing. From there, the Gemara seems to learn out that there are other Inuyim as well. And then we have to figure out what those Inuyim are. And then the Gemara brings down Psukim to say that each of these are considered Inuyim. But the source for the Isser is the word Shabbosain. Continues the Mechaber, right, by the Ois Gimel for the Mishnah Berurah. While it's true, says the Mechaber, that you have Chamishi Inuyim plus an Isser Malacha on Yom Kippur, says the Mechaber, Ve'ein Chiv Kares Ela Al Malacha Va'achila Ushtia. When it comes to the Einish of Kares, you should know what is considered to be an Isser Krisus on Yom Kippur. Only Malacha, doing forbidden Malacha on Yom Kippur, and Achila and Shtia. The rest of the Chamishi Inuyim, if somebody takes a shower, Chas v'Chalila, on Yom Kippur, that's not an Isser Krisus. That's an Isser Lav. You're not allowed to do that. But it's not an Isser Krisus. If somebody wears shoes on Yom Kippur, that's not an Isser Krisus. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Katan Gimel. Ve'ein Chiv Kares Ella, the Chiv Kares is only on Malacha and Achila and Shtia. Aval Inach, but the others of the Chamishi Inuyim, Ein Bahem Ela Isura Greda. These are only a normal Isser, these are only an Isser Lav. Mikamokim, nevertheless, Yesh Oimrim Shehu Min HaTorah. There are those that say that the other of the Chamishi Inuyim, and probably most notably the Rambam, they hold that all of the Chamishi Inuyim are Isurei Da'araisa. So Ni'ilus HaSandal would be an Issa Daraisa. Tashri Shemitah would be an Issa Daraisa. The same way Achil Shti and Malach are Isurei Daraisa. The only difference is that even though they're all Isurei Daraisa, they do not all come with the Einish of Kares. They don't all carry the penalty of Kares. That's only for Malacha, Achila, and Shtia. But they all are Isurei Daraisa. Shehu min HaTorah, v'daha yalfinu lahu b'shas mikrai. These Rishonim, their rationale is, they say, hey, if you look at the Gemara learns out the Chamishi Inuyim from Psukim. So if we learn them out from Psukim, so then they're Isurei Daraisa. However, V'yeshayimim, and there are others that say, I think most notably the Rosh, She'enon Ela Midrabanan, that the other of the Chamishi Inuyim are only Isurei Darabanan, they're not Isurei Daraisa. Ukroi, and this that we see in the Gemara that we darshan there from Psukim, Asmachta Ba'almaninhu. This is only what's called an Asmachta. It's only something that the Chazal leaned, it was a nail to hang their hat on. They found a pasuk that they could lean against and say, the Chamishi Inuyim are Aser, and we're basing our Issa D'Rabbanan on these Psukim. We're using these Psukim as source material. But it's not really an Issa D'Raisa, it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. What's the nafkamina to us, whether it's a D'Rabbanan or a D'Raisa? Even if it's a D'Rabbanan, it's still Aser. Don't look at it and say, yeah, it's only a D'Rabbanan, I can pick and choose. No. Now how to do that? It's an D'Rabbanan. So what's the difference between this D'Rabbanan and this D'Raisa? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. No, there is a big nafkamina. The nafkamina is Safik D'Raisa l'chumra, Safik D'Rabbanan l'kula. So if we would have some kind of Safik, it wouldn't be Aser. However, halacha l'maisa, says the Chavetz Chaim, we should be machmir and we should treat all of the Chamishi Inuyim as Isurei Daraisa. Continues the Mechaber Sif Beis. Kol malacha shechayavim alea b'Shabbos, any malacha which is aser to do on Shabbos, and you would be chayiv if you did that malacha on Shabbos. Chayavim aleha b'Yom Kippur. You're also chayiv if you perform that malacha on Yom Kippur. So when it comes to malacha, the halachas of Shabbos and the halachas of Yom Kippur are identical. V'chol sheb'Shabbos pater aval aser, and anything where we find on Shabbos where if you do it, you're pater, meaning you're exempt from bringing karban chatas. If you did it b'shogeg, aval aser, but it's still aser, it's still something that you're not allowed to do. Gam b'Yom Kippurim kain, so too on Yom Kippur, the the halacha would be that item, that malacha, is pater aval aser. Ella, however, what we do find is Shabbos zdoinoi beskila, where we do have a great difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur is that on Shabbos, if you do malacha purposely, if you do malacha b'mezid on Shabbos, beskila, you're liable to the capital punishment of skila, meted out by Bezdin. While on Yom Kippur, there is no misa bidei adam, Bezdin is not going to mete out a capital punishment. On Yom Kippur, it's an Isser Krisus. The Rabbeinu Shalom would mete out the punishment of Kares min hashamayim. V'chol she'asal l'taltaloi b'Shabbos, anything that has an Isser Muktzah on Shabbos, also l'taltaloi b'Yom Kippurim, has an Isser Muktzah on Yom Kippur as well. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Katan Daled. Elo Shabbos Zdoinoi, you want to know what difference there is between Shabbos and Yom Kippur? The Mechaber said, I'll tell you what the difference is. On Shabbos, if you do malacha b'mezid, you're chayiv skila, where on Yom Kippur, you're chayiv kares. Says the Chavetz Chaim seems to be wondering, why did the Mechaber feel the need to tell this to us? We don't have a Sanhedrin, we don't have an authorized Bezdin, and therefore we're not meting out capital punishment anyway. So why is the Mechaber going to pains to tell me that the difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbos is that on Shabbos there's Misa B'dei Adam, and on Yom Kippur there's only Misa B'dei Shamayim with Kares? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, even though nowadays we don't have a Bezdin that can mete out capital punishment, there still is a halachic nafkamina for you to know this difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur, and that is the klal of kimle b'derabamine. What's kimle b'derabamine? Kimle b'derabamine is the concept that tells us that when somebody is liable for two different punishments, he gets the stricter one. So, in the case that the Chavetz Chaim gives over here, let's continue the Mishnah Berurah. The hachovel b'chaveroi b'Shabbos. Let's say somebody punches his friend on Shabbos, and he makes a chabura. He causes a wound on Shabbos. Now, that would be a chi of misa. If this person did this b'mezid on Shabbos, he did it intentionally on Shabbos, and he had hasra, he was warned. If you go ahead and punch him and you make a chabura, you're going to be chai of misa, because that would be the malacha of shoichet. That's a malacha on Shabbos. And it's a told of the malacha of shoichet, but it doesn't matter. You're over that malacha, and now you're going to be chayiv misa. Since this person did a malacha on Shabbos, and he did it intentionally with hasra, so now he's chayiv misa in Bezdin. Pater mitashlumin. Now he's also exempt from paying the person that he punched. We know if somebody hurts another person, he has a monetary obligation to pay that person. He has to pay nezek, tsar, ripui, sheves, poishes. If you injure another person, you have to pay the chamisha dvarim. So when you punch somebody on Shabbos intentionally, you're incurring a chiyuv of capital punishment for desecrating the Shabbos. You also incur a financial obligation to pay the person. But the precept of kimle b'derabamine says, since you're chayiv misa, you don't have to make the financial restitution. We only mete out to you the capital punishment. We don't mete out to you the financial punishment. So the achovel b'chavera, if somebody wounds his friend b'Shabbos on Shabbos, kevin dahaya mechuyev misa b'dei adam, since he's liable to capital punishment b'dei adam, pater mitashlumin, he's pater for making the financial payments of the chamisha dvarim. Va'afilu b'chovel b'shoigeg, and even somebody who makes a wound on another person on Shabbos b'shoigeg, so he's not chayiv misa. He only did it b'shoigeg, so maybe now he's chayiv to pay the chamisha dvarim. No, the halacha is that he's not. Since you did something which, if you did it b'mezid, it would carry capital punishment, if you also incurred a financial obligation when you did it, you're exempt from paying that financial obligation. So on Shabbos, if somebody injured his friend b'mezid, we say kimle b'derabamine, and since At least in theory, he would be liable to capital punishment. He doesn't have to pay. But on Yom Kippur, there is no capital punishment bidei Adam. The only capital punishment is kares, which is bidei Shamayim. And to that, we do not apply the precept of Kimlei b'derabbi minei. And therefore, Achayvo b'chaveroi b'Yom Kippur would have to pay the Chamisha Dvarim, because there's no reason to say Kimlei b'derabbi minei, because the Chiv Misa is the Chiv Krisus, which is bidei Shamayim, not bidei Adam. Okay, now let's go to the very bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. We said that there's an Isser Malacha on Yom Kippur the same way there's an Isser Malacha on Shabbos. We said that there's an Isser Tiltel on Yom Kippur the same way there's an Isser Tiltel on Shabbos. But, says the Chavetz Chaim here, V'tiru lekanev yerek. The Chachamim were matir you to do what's called kenivas yerek. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to define for us what kenivas yerek is. V'liptsaya egoism, let's turn to Ayin Hey Amud Beis. And it's also mutter to crack and open nuts. Min ha-mincha ulamayla, after the zman of mincha ketana. Mincha Ketana is 2.5 hours before Shkia. So, once you reach 2.5 hours before Shkia, on Yom Kippur day, so this is on the 10th of Tishrei, not the 9th of Tishrei, not Erev Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur itself, once you reach the point late in the day, where it's already 2.5 hours before Shkia, now you could do Kenivas Yerek, and you could also crack and open nuts, Kishachal B'choil, if Yom Kippur falls out on a weekday. What's going on over here? What's at play? Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Hey, back on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. V'hitiru lekanev yerek. The Chachamim were matir, they allowed Knivas Yerek. What's Knivas Yerek? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Yesh Pershu, there are those that define Knivas Yerek. The high Kniva, what is this Kniva? Hu shenoitek oy mechatech ha'olim min haklachim. This refers to pulling off or cutting off the leaves off of stalks of vegetables, hatlushin, if those vegetables are already removed from the ground. So let's say you have carrots. You already pulled the carrots out of the ground before Yom Kippur. Now Yom Kippur, in the middle of Yom Kippur day, you're thinking about getting the Suda ready for Matzah Yom Kippur, and you want to cut the greens off the carrots. So there are those that say that Knivas Yerek refers to cutting the greens off the carrots once the carrots are removed from the ground. You see, to remove the greens from the carrots when the carrots are still in the ground, that would be an Issa Daraisa, because then you're doing Toilish, you're cutting something off of something that's growing in the ground, you're cutting it off the ground. What the Chazal were makelin, what the Chazal said you're allowed to do on Yom Kippur day, once it's 2.5 hours before Shkia, is this Knivas Yerek. You have a bunch of carrots that have already been removed from the ground, and now you want to cut the green tops off of those carrots in order to start preparing the carrots for use for your vegetable soup on Matzah Yom Kippur. That you're allowed to do late in the day on Yom Kippur. Now, why would you think that that's usher? We'll get there, but let's go one step at a time. So the Chavetz Chaim said over here in Mishnah Berurah is Katan Hey, what's Knivas Yerek? Yeshe Pershu, there are those that explain. Taha Kniva, what is this Kniva? Who shenoitek, this refers to either pulling off, mechatech, or cutting off, ha'olim, the greens, the leaves, min haklachim, from the stalks, hatlushin, that have already been cut off of the ground, kedei lahashvoisan, in order to straighten them out, sheyu muchanim lechatchan be'erev, so that they're ready to be chopped up Matzah Yom Kippur to use for your Matzah Yom Kippur meal. Now, why did we need Chazal to be matir this? What is there to be matir? What Isser would be involved in doing this? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. V'afagav de katarach b'shvil erev shehu chol. The Chazal said that this Knivas Yerek is mutter, even though you're being matriach, you're exerting yourself, you're doing work on Yom Kippur, for what? For Matzah Yom Kippur. So that means that you're preparing on the Kodesh, you're preparing on Yom Kippur for Matzah Yom Kippur. Oh, we would think that that's a problem. That's why the Mechaber saw fit to mention over here the hitiru lekanev yerek, that the Chazal were matir this knivas yerek. They were matir you to do this on Yom Kippur, even though there's an aspect of hachana from the Kodesh for the Chayil. And the Chavetz Chaim explains here on the bottom line, hitiru, they were matir this, kedei shelo yitztarech lesaken hakol be'erev, so that you shouldn't have to prepare your meal 100% from scratch on Matzah Yom Kippur. Utehei nafshay aguma alav. You will have aggravation over this. You'll be stressing out about this all day Yom Kippur. When you're trying to daven, you're going to be thinking to yourself, boy, I'm going to be starved when I get home. And the first thing I'm going to have to do is the knivas yerek. I'm going to have to start cutting the greens off all of the vegetables and then peeling them and then this and then that. So the Chazal said, listen, as much as we could get off of your mind for Yom Kippur Day, we want to do so you could daven like a bench and you could think about the important things on Yom Kippur Day. Therefore, there were matir knivas yerek, because there's no real isser involved. The only problem is this aspect of hachana, that the Chazal were willing to be matir. That's one pshat in knivas yerek. Continues the Chavetz Chaim and he says, "V'yeshe pershu." There are those that explain differently, and they say the kniva who. What is this knivas yerek? Who hadochas hayerek l'tzarech erev. This refers to washing the vegetables for Matzah Yom Kippur. V'shari gam kemi tamanal. And if that's what it means, so then again, there's no real isser involved in washing off the vegetables, even though we did see previously. And they speak about this, that maybe there's a potential Berurah issue, but we're assuming not. So again, the Chazal will matter you to wash the vegetables, even though there's a certain aspect of hachana. It looks like you're doing hachana on Yom Kippur, on the Kadosh, for Matzah Yom Kippur for Chayil. Still, they were matter this. Why were they matter it? So that you shouldn't be stressed out on Yom Kippur thinking about your Matzah Yom Kippur meal, that it's not ready and you're going to have to run home after shul and get your meal ready from scratch. In order to avoid that, they were matter this knivas yerek. Ice cotton vav here on Ayin Hayomid Beis. V'levtzaya egoizim. They were also matter to crack open nuts. Again, says the Chavetz Chaim, why were they matter this? So that the nuts should be ready and prepared for the Suda on Matzah Yom Kippur. And you shouldn't have to start working on your meal Matzah Tainus and start from scratch, cracking open nuts, etc. There's a very interesting biur halacha over here that speaks about cracking the nuts, that maybe there's a Berurah issue, especially if you're going to crack open the nut and take out the inside. That's dush. So maybe there's a dush issue. How could we mean matir dush? And that's a very interesting biur halacha that discusses this. Ice cotton zayin in the Mishnah Berurah. When is this mutter? Min mincha ulamayla. It's only mutter late in the day on Yom Kippur afternoon, when you already hit the zman of mincha ktana. It's 2.5 hours before shkia. That's when this knivas yerek and ptzias egoizim is mutter. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why? Why is it only mutter after mincha ktana? Says the Chavetz Chaim, mincha ktana. When the Mechaber says that this is mutter min mincha ulamayla, he's referring to the zman of mincha ktana, which is 2.5 hours before shkia. Shehu samach le'erev, that's already close to the night. It says the Chavetz Chaim, you know why this is mutter? Because once you reach the time of mincha ktana, anybody who sees you or your wife working in the kitchen is already assuming that you're working in the kitchen to prepare the Matzah Yom Kippur meal. And therefore people realize that you're doing it for the night meal. But earlier in the day this would be aser, because now it looks like you're doing it for use on Yom Kippur. What kind of use on Yom Kippur? You're not allowed to eat, you're not allowed to drink on Yom Kippur. So to do this knivas yerek or the ptzias egoizim on Yom Kippur itself early in the day, that we don't want to do. It looks like you're preparing a meal on Yom Kippur. But to do it once it's already the zman of mincha ktana, everybody realizes you're doing it for later, and then we don't have a problem anymore of marasayin, etc. Ice cotton ches. The Mechaber said that we could do this when Yom Kippur falls out on a weekday. When Yom Kippur falls out on a weekday, you could do Knivas Yerek and Petzias Egoizim in the afternoon after the Zman of Mincha Ketana. Aval, however, says the Chavetz Chaim here in Ois Katan Ches, Kishachal Yom Kippurim b'Shabbos lo yitiru. When Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, then we are not mater this Knivas Yerek or Petzias Egoizim. Why? Kedei shelo yavai lases kein b'chol Shabbos hashana lahachin bayom l'tzarech halayla. Let's remember, really, the Chazal want this to be usher. The Chazal don't want you to be doing hachana on Yom Kippur for Matzah Yom Kippur. They will matter it because they don't want you stressing out over your meal. But other than that, they wouldn't be matter it. So to do Knivas Yerek on Shabbos afternoon from Malav Malka, that's usher. That's hachana. So the Chazal said like this: if Yom Kippur is a Wednesday, so then we'll be matter it because we don't want you to be stressed out over your Matzah Yom Kippur meal. But if Yom Kippur is on Shabbos, and we're going to let you do hachana on Shabbos for Matzah Shabbos Yom Kippur, then somebody might make a mistake and he might think it's mutter every Shabbos of the year, not only when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, and that we didn't want. Now we go to the Ramah, near the end of the top line here on Ayin Hamid base. Says the Ramah, before the Ramah, the last few words of the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, V'layidna nagu le'esar. Nowadays, our minig is to aser, this Knivas Yerek and this Ptzias Egoizim, even late in the day on Yom Kippur afternoon, even when Yom Kippur falls out during the week, we're not matter this, we aser it. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cut test for idna nagu le'esar. Why? Why is the minig to aser it? Why don't we follow this reasoning that we should be matter it so people shouldn't be stressed out over their meal? Says the Chavetz Chaim, the reason they asked it is lefisha b'doros ha'achronim, in the later generations, hischilu lekalkel, this became a ruinous minig, ulemayar lases dvarim elu kaidam amincha, and people were starting to prepare their Matzah Yom Kippur meal already early in the day on Yom Kippur. Lefikach, therefore, bitlu leheter deknivas yerek u'ptzias egoizim legamri. They did away with this heter of knivas yerek and ptzias egoizim. Okay, now we go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah near the end of the top line, Ayin Hamid Beis in the Mishnah in the Shulchan Aruch. Haga says the Ramah. Im nafla deleika b'yom kippurim. If chas v'chalila a fire broke out on Yom Kippur, muta lahatzel suda achas l'tzarech laila. We learned that there's a halacha on Shabbos. If chas v'chalila a fire breaks out on Shabbos, you're restricted in what you're allowed to save from the house. We're not going to let you go into the house and save everything that you need because we're afraid once we're going to let you go into the house and start pulling out the wedding album and the shas and everything else, you're going to forget that it's Shabbos and you're going to come to put the fire out. So we're very strict about what you're allowed to save from the deleika. And over there we learned that it depends at what point on Shabbos it is. If it's before the Friday night meal, you're allowed to save what you need for all of your Shabbos sudas. Over here, when it comes to Yom Kippur, says the Ramah, what's the halacha on Yom Kippur? If a fire breaks out on Yom Kippur, what are you allowed to save from the house? Says the Ramah, you could save enough food for one meal, l'tzarech laila, so that you have food for Matzah Tainus. What, we're going to have you fast the whole day Yom Kippur and then not have any food to break your fast on Matzah Yom Kippur? No. So if a fire breaks out on Yom Kippur, you could go into the house and you could pull out the food that you need for one meal for Matzah Tainus. The same way if chas v'chalila a fire would break out Shabbos afternoon, you're allowed to save from the house l'sudas mincha for your shalosh shudas meal. If the fire broke out Shabbos morning, then you could go save food for the Shabbos day meal and the shalosh shudas meal. But if it breaks out later in the afternoon, so you already ate the Shabbos day suda, then you could save suda achas for the shalosh shudas suda. We learned at great detail. I remember this is one of the first simanim that I learned together with you, Rabbi Isai, the ones in the shir from Rabbi Palak Shul. This is one of the first simanim that we learned together with Siman Shin Lamed, where we learned what you're allowed to save from a house, from a fire on Shabbos. For Hadin b'Yom Kippur, the same halachas apply in Yom Kippur. V'nagu, we have a minig shati noikos v'sachakim be'egoizim, that the children are allowed to play with nuts. And you should not protest against those children who play with nuts. Even if they do it earlier in the day, Shabbos afternoon, before Mincha Ktana. And this minig of playing with nuts came from this halacha of Petzias Egoizim, where they were matter to crack open nuts on Yom Kippur afternoon, Yom Kippur evening, after the Zman of Mincha Ktana. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud. If a fire breaks out on Yom Kippur, you're allowed to save the food that you need for one meal, for the meal of Matzah Tainus. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud, L'sarach Laila, Shalach Yomi Kippurim. This means the Suda of Matzah Tainus. The reason we're matter this is because otherwise what are you going to do? You just fasted a whole day. You need food, Matzah Yom Kippur. And the Ramah said this is mutter, the same way it's mutter on Shabbos to save food for Sudas Mincha. Says the Chavetz Chaim is cutting it aleph for Tzanya Loimar. What the Ramah means when he mentions Sudas Mincha, what's he referring to? Afilu nafla dleika batzaharayim. He means even if a fire breaks out Chas v'chalila Shabbos afternoon, after you already ate the Shabbos day Suda. So now if a fire breaks out, you're not allowed to save food for the Shabbos day Suda. You already ate the Shabbos day Suda. But you're allowed to save food for Shal Shudas. Same thing here. Fire breaks out Yom Kippur in the afternoon, you're allowed to go ahead and save food for the one meal that you're going to need to have, Matzah Tainus. V'chanal b'simin Shimon Lamed. The Ramah said that there's a minig that the children would play with nuts. V'dafka al hashulchan v'loy al gabe karka. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this halacha that the children are allowed to play with nuts, how did they play with nuts? So they took a nut, they put it on the floor, and they would roll it to go hit another nut, to go knock a nut out of the circle, like marbles, etc. So, says the Chavetz Chaim, when the Ramah says that the children are allowed to play with nuts, it does not mean on the ground. It means on a table. Why can't it mean on the ground? Because on the ground, says the Chavetz Chaim, would be aser to asi la ashvuye gumais, because of the Yisr D'Rabbanan that disallows certain activities on the floor, because you might come to level out the floor and to fill in cracks and crevices, which would be an Isser of Boina. It would be a told of the Av Malacha of Boina of building. Okay, we're going to stop over here. So Baruch Hashem, we covered up some ground. We're going to continue with Hashem next time with Siman Tov Reshut Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. The tzchus of Limud HaTorah should be megan and ganz Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's, Refuras, Parnasa, Gesund to everyone in need. And the Rebbeinu Shalom we should be Zaycha to see the Bias Kol Tzedek B'meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.